It's the quantum leap that occurs between the 97 and the 3 that I want to talk to you about today, because I am irrevocably convinced, after discovering some of the most cutting-edge psychology in the cognitive field over the last year, that everybody in this room can walk out of here and can launch a career beginning next Monday that will turn them into $100,000 a week earners in 6 months, because I'm going to arm you with the principle.
It is my privilege to introduce the next person that's going to come up and speak. I want you all to know how this business of networking works. It's really amazing. It's really strange. And I got started in this business in 1987, and I got a hand of some tapes that really made a big impact on my life. Some tapes produced by Mark Yarnell and Reed Yarnell, Mark's wife. And I was listening to those tapes, and there was so much incredible information on there that just really empowered me. See, this business is not only about education, it's also about empowering you to take that action, to actually utilize this information that you know so you can go to that next level. And these tapes really empowered me in a big way. And I'll tell you, the neat thing about network marketing is that Mark doesn't even know this. He doesn't even know that I listened to his tapes, that I've been using that material, that information. I've been sharing his story to people all around the world. And people have been impacted. People in Canada, people in Europe, people here in the States, people all over the world have been impacted from this information. And that's the neat thing about that. So I don't even need to say anything about Mark Yarnell. You all know Mark because if you read Success Magazine, you'll take a look at a lot of articles he's written from there. If you've just really heard anyone talking about anyone in this business, you hear him talking about Mark Yarnell. He has people in over 20 countries in his organization, over 200,000 distributors, and I'm not going to tell you the type of money he's making because, as has already been said, you won't even believe it, right, Eileen? All I got to say is just really continue to do what you guys are doing, because you guys are doing a great job taking notes. I can see it from up there. You guys are really into this, and that's what this is all about. It's about learning. It's about growing. Anytime you get an opportunity to learn from multimillionaires, do it. This is this little hour of information, which is going to give you knowledge that you can use to go to the next level. But get their books, get their tapes. I mean, get Eileen's material, great information there to take you to the next level. Every single person, if I were you guys, I would just, Eileen said I'll buy thousands of dollars worth of stuff every single month. That's right. So please help me to introduce Mr. Mark Yarnell.
I love the country Australia, and there's a race over there that I found out about recently that I just couldn't believe when I heard about it. It is a 600-kilometer race between Melbourne and Sydney. And it's run every single year by some of the most remarkable world-class athletes on this planet. In fact, it's quite a prestigious thing to finish in the top 20. It's run by typically 175 to 200 really high-caliber performers. Well, the interesting thing happened in 1989 that was to forever change this race. A guy showed up by the name of Cliff Young. Now, Mr. Young was a little bit different than anybody there, and most of the media, and I believe most of the people who were there to watch the race, most of the spectators believed that Mr. Young was probably himself a spectator. And one of the reasons was he's 61 years old, and he not only was 61 years old, but, well, let me go a step further. When the media began to observe him, he was at the table to take a number. And it became apparent to them that this guy was going to run in the race, in a 300-kilometer race at his age. Now, he not only was 61 years old, but he had on galoshes, you know, rubber galoshes, big ones, fat ones. And he had on overalls, Big Mac overalls. And when the media became aware of the fact that he was probably going to run in this race, they thought it might be a joke, but they gathered around him and started asking him questions. And sure enough, he was going to run in the race, and they asked him his story and asked him why he thought at his age he could participate at this high level of sports. So at any rate, they gathered around him and asked him his story, and Cliff Young told this story. He said, well, you know, I grew up outside of Adelaide on a farm, and we couldn't afford horses, and we had a lot of really bad storms in that part of Australia, and I used to have to run after the cattle and get it in. And sometimes I'd run, believe it or not, 2-3 days at a time. And he said, reason I'm running in these overalls and the galoshes, because that's the way I used to chase the cows. And I always caught them. And I believe I can win this race. And they all kind of laughed at him and said, that's preposterous. And they started the race, and Cliff Young was right in the middle of the front runners. And the thing that made it even more horrible was he had a pitiful shuffle. He didn't run aerodynamically. Yeah, he kind of clopped along in his galoshes, and people shouted, honest to goodness, people shouted, he'll die, somebody stop him. He's 61. Now, here's what happened. When the race was over, in the customary 5 days, because there's a paradigm in this race that all the runners understood, and the paradigm is this. All of them would run for 18 hours and then sleep for 6. I remember the first time I heard about this, I thought, to me it'd make more sense to run for 6 and sleep for 18. That didn't compute in my brain, but they do. They run for 18 hours, still do, and they sleep for 6. That was their paradigm. At the end of the 5-day race, Cliff Young had finished the race. As a matter of fact, he finished a day and a half before any of the other competitors. He won first place. In a day and a half, ahead of everybody. And when the media finally figured out what the difference was, and by the way, today, if you go to Sydney or Melbourne, you can observe this race in August, and you'll notice something about them. About half of them do the Cliff Young Shuffle now. Because it's a better way to run 600 kilometers than world-class athletes. And these other guys and gals, they had sponsors, Nike, all the big, but not Cliff Young. He didn't even have an observer. He didn't have a coach. He had every odd in the world against him. And what the media discovered when he finished the race was real simple. He had a different paradigm. He never slept. For those 6 hours every night, when everybody else was asleep, Cliff Young just kept running. Because when he had to catch the cows, he couldn't sleep. And his paradigm was to run the whole race straight through. Now, I know what you're thinking. No, I couldn't make that up. Check me out. I've told this story to a number of audiences, and I get phone calls every time within a week. My God, they do the Young Shuffle. Yarnell, I thought you made that up. It's a true story. The Cliff Young Shuffle. Here's the point. Armed with the right paradigm, and this is something I want to talk to you about in my hour today. Armed with the right paradigm, anyone can accomplish anything in any endeavor so long as that endeavor has no limitations. With the right paradigm, anybody can accomplish anything, but there can't be limitations. Now I've got a question to ask you. Have any of you read the Worthington Group report, one of the largest research firms in Washington, D.C., and most respected? It just came out recently about our industry, our wonderful industry. I'm going to tell you something going to blow your mind. There are 30 million distributors, independent distributors all over the world now, and estimated, and that's pretty close according to the Worthington Group. And 97% of them earn under $93,000 a year. How can that happen in an unlimited industry? Multi-level marketing offers the same unlimited opportunity to everybody. And here's what's fascinating to me. It's not, I would have believed this anyway. It's not that 97% of the people earn under $100,000 a year that is interesting to me. I buy that. It's the fact that when you get into the other 3%, many of them earn that much a month. It's the quantum leap that occurs between the 97 and the 3 that I want to talk to you about today, because I am irrevocably convinced after discovering some of the most cutting-edge psychology in the cognitive field over the last year that everybody in this room can walk out of here and can launch a career beginning next Monday that will turn them into $100,000 a week earners in 6 months, because I'm going to arm you with the principle. No goofing around, folks. I'm more excited about this technology than anything I have ever learned. And let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you something on me. For the last 10 years, I've wandered from arena to arena, from ballroom to ballroom, from hotel to hotel, unconsciously telling people my systems because I didn't know what I didn't know. I thought if I just went back and came up with techniques and the systems that I used in the first 4 months in the business to get me to $15,000 a month income with no experience in the industry. I thought, well, if I just arm people with those techniques and those systems, everybody's going to do it. And I got more and more depressed over the years because I couldn't find hardly anybody who could duplicate Mark Yarnell. And I knew it wasn't my education because I don't have a degree. And I knew it wasn't my plethora of experience because I'd never done business. I was a Methodist minister, and I knew it wasn't my parents because they were poor, and it wasn't my background. It was my technique, I thought. You know what? I didn't know what I didn't know. I was an unconscious competent. I had the competency skills to build a huge network, but I didn't know how I did it. So I pretended that the key was systems. I want to talk to you about the quantum leap between the 97%, where most people find themselves, into the 3%, because it can be duplicated. It can be duplicated easily. Recent breakthroughs, and I mean major breakthroughs, in the cognitive sciences have proven several things about our brain wiring, and I'm going to recommend that you get 3 books. They're critical. The first one is called Thought Contagion by Aaron Lynch. That's Thought Contagion by Aaron Lynch. I spoke to a group of 400 doctors recently in the Pacific Northwest, many of them psychiatrists, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you have read Thought Contagion by Aaron Lynch, based on the seminal chapter of a 20-year-old book that was a bestseller that was called The Selfish Gene? The word meme was coined in the last chapter of Dawkins' book. Brilliant guy. I said, how many of you have read Thought Contagion? Not one hand went up. Most important work to come out in the last 6 weeks, and most doctors don't even know about it, by Thought Contagion by Aaron Lynch. The next book I'm going to recommend is Self-Efficacy by Dr. Bandura of Stanford University. That's B-A-N-D-U-R-A. Self-Efficacy. Bandura is arguably the most quoted psychologist, cognitive expert on this planet. If you read his articles in Psychology Today, you know who Dr. Bandura is. And finally, a book that I have with me on the podium called How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker. How the Mind Works. It's been out 2 weeks. Dr. Pinker is the head of the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience at MIT. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not hypothetical theories that we're talking about today, or that I'm going to talk to you about today. These are facts. There are 3 levels of consciousness in the human brain. Now, this isn't the gospel according to Mark. These are facts based on the most cutting-edge research in the cognitive field. There are 3 levels of consciousness. The first level is the consciousness that most of that 97% of the people who earn under $93,000 a year in the world's most unlimited profession, network marketing, are in. And it's called unconscious incompetence. They don't know anything, and they don't know what they don't know. And that's the worst position to be in. The second level is unconscious competence. And that's where I found myself for the last 10 years. After I think I got out of the unconscious incompetent, I got into the unconscious competent. I developed certain competencies, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So I went around trying to duplicate myself among a bunch of unconscious incompetents, and I myself was totally unconscious and was a blithering idiot. But I stood in front of audiences and got ovations and people applauded, and I walked off, and then they went home and did nothing of value. I just had lunch with Pontius. We were talking about this very thing. How many times have you yourselves, knowing technology, knowing how this business works, knowing what to do, having all the systems, read all the books, heard all the tapes, found somebody who had all of the potential in the world, a Rolodex of 5,000 credible people in their community, and they quit in 4 weeks? Or worse, they stuck with it 4 years and never made over $2,000 a month. And you thought to yourself, how is this possible in an unlimited field with tremendous products and every system that works? How did this happen? Real simple. They were unconscious, and so were you. I submit that 97% of all MLMers are in category 1. I think most 3%ers are unconscious competence. They don't know why, but they know how. And they have the competency to make the big money, but they really don't know how they did it for sure, and they sure don't know how to tell other people to do it. And that was me, as I said, for 10 years. So we teach systems. Those of us who get to the big money, we teach aphorisms, and we write books, and we record audios and videos. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Here's a fact. No system, no seminar, no mentor, no outside consultant, no audio, no book, no video, no process of any kind has gotten one company in our industry to $10 billion, and that is a pimple on a frog's butt in the world of economics. There isn't one company. Our company's been around now for 50 years, and not one of them is even a little company, and yet we're in 111 countries. What's going on? Not one coach, not one video, not one audio, not one outside consultant, none of the outer things, as Eileen was talking about, the outer stuff has been able to get more than 3% of the people in an unlimited opportunity to over $93,000 a year. What does that tell you? There's something amiss. There's something amiss, and I'm proud to have been part of it. Why, when we've got the best product? Can anybody, you tell me the truth now, you'll agree with this. We have better products and services than you can buy out of any catalog or in any store, and we all know that. My own products, if they're not good enough and I find a category that's not good enough, I go straight to Enrich or OxyFresh or Amway because I know all those products are 10 times better than anything I can buy at Walmart. We got the best products in the world. We've got the best form of distribution. How many times have we heard word of mouth is the best form of advertising? There is no better than a friend telling a friend. So we got the best form of distribution because we got the best form of advertising. It's free. It's word of mouth. When one of us tells a friend, hey, this is a great stuff, they're probably going to use it. So we got the best products. We've got the best advertising and distribution. And number 3, we've got an unlimited revenue stream.
That's right. We have the best of the best in this industry, and I hope that you are proud and excited to be a part of it. Let's go ahead and take a 30-second mental break, and then we will join Mark back at the live seminar.
There is not a person in this room that is limited by any network marketing company as to how many people you can recruit and hence how much volume you can create and hence how much you can earn. There are no limitations. So what's going on? How come I signed up the mayor of Austin, Texas, who owned the biggest real estate firm and insurance company, and I signed up my maid? And how come he quit in 5 months and never earned $1,000 a month as mayor of Austin? You think people knew him? You think he had credibility? He lived in Austin, Texas, the capital of the great state that we're in. And yet, in 5 months of duplicating what I taught him, he couldn't even get to $1,000 a month. And my little maid, Kathy Dennison, who was in an abusive marriage in Basalt, Colorado, population 180, in a 1-bedroom crud apartment, became a multimillionaire. Hello? How did that happen? They both learned the same techniques, and you could liken the mayor, former mayor Ron Mullen of Austin, Texas, to the fastest world-class athlete in that group that was defeated by Cliff Young, and you can liken Kathy to Cliff Young because she had everything going against her. She had galoshes, metaphorically speaking, she had the galoshes, she had the age, she had everything going against her, all the obstacles. She's a multimillionaire. What happened? The good news is this: anyone can become a conscious competent quickly once paradigms change. And the really good news is paradigms are easy to change. We only need to know 3 things. Number 1, how the brain works to support paradigms. Number 2, which paradigms are erroneous. And number 3, how to create new paradigms which will become self-fulfilling prophecies as memes become M-E-M-E. And you'll learn about those when you read Thought Contagion. I'm a little bit of a disadvantage because I've got to cram a year's reading and 150 hours of seminar experience at the University of Seattle and the Pacific Institute into the next 45 minutes. I'm going to do my best. I'll admit this is going to be an oversimplification. The reason I gave you the names of the books is because they will support every contention I'm giving you, and then you will read them for yourself from some of the greatest cognitive psychologists on the planet, and you'll accept them as fact. Trust me, if you get the books, they'll validate everything I'm going to tell you. Number 1, you've got to know how the brain works to support paradigms, and here's how the brain works. And it's cutting-edge stuff. And again, I want to reiterate, I got this from Bandura of Stanford, Lou Tice of the Pacific Institute, Steve Pinker of MIT, and Dr. John Radford, who was handpicked. Dr. Radford has a triple PhD, was handpicked by Nelson Mandela to end apartheid, and he did. And he and I have been working together for the last 6 months very, very intimately. Here's how the brain works. We all have a reticular activating system in our brainstem, and that reticular activating system, which is what it's called, is literally the best executive secretary in the world because it sorts through the roughly 30,000 auditory and visual input data per second that we absorb as human beings and focuses in on only those things which is relevant. The RAS, the reticular activating system, is simply an executive secretary, and a good one. And if we didn't have it, we'd go nuts. Because we are being bombarded with roughly 30,000 inputs a second any day. Maybe half that if you're sitting alone in your living room. Maybe 15,000 if you're doing nothing. We're still being bombarded with peripheral vision, auditory cues, etc. And so the reticular activating system is simply there to screen out that which isn't relevant. In fact, it does three things. Number one, it screens out information that is relevant to our specific task. It allows through information that's relevant to our specific task. The second thing it does is it lets in information relevant to our specific paradigms, our belief systems, anything in support of our paradigm. And finally, it lets in threats to us or loved ones. Now, let me just give you a few examples. One happened to me yesterday, and it's a classic example, and I had to laugh when it happened. Those of you who've ever been in the Reno airport know that it's insane. And especially on Fridays and Saturdays, because most people who go to Reno to game, and I want to thank those of you who ever have, we have no state income tax, God bless you. And so what happens is every Friday and Saturday, people show up by the plane load, and then every Friday and Saturday they leave. I've got one task in mind, to get to Dallas by gate B4 and Delta Airlines, and I'm walking through a menagerie of people, half drunk. Some have won money, some have lost, some are in a great mood, some aren't. The paging system's going berserk. It never stops, calling people to the phone. I walk by every gate, and there are hundreds of people. They're in the snack bar, they're in the smoking room, and noise and bombardment is insane. And nothing's bothering me, and nothing's getting my attention, because my task is to get to B4. And so I'm going along, and nothing gets to me until I hear over the paging system, "Would Mark Yarnell please pick up the white paging phone?" That wasn't even my name, but it was close. And my reticular activating system immediately forced me to a telephone, and I picked it up, and it was my wife, and she had data relevant to this trip. Now, why did I hear none of the other pages? They weren't relevant. But if I hear my name or you hear yours in the midst of the most ridiculous chaos, or how about this, you're at a cocktail party, and you've got a whole group of people spread out, and you're talking to one group of three people, and over in the far corner, somebody mentions your business or your name, says something about multi-level, something about Amway, something about, just mentions your name, and excuse me, I gotta go see what they're talking about. You want to know. Why did you pick that up? There are 50 other conversations going on all around you because your reticular activating system told you this is necessary and screened out everything except that input. And you acted on it. I can give you example after example after example. Ladies in New York City in a tenement apartment. And down below are the cars, and it's noisy, and and she sleeps days, and there are jackhammers going, and there are sirens. It's New York. And she's got an infant across the room. And for 2 hours, she sleeps soundly from 2 until 4 in the afternoon. And she wouldn't have awakened till 6 when the alarm goes off to get ready for work, except for one thing, the baby cries. Infinitely softer than the traffic, and she's awake like that. Because her reticular activating system screens out everything that's not relevant in terms of threats to herself or loved ones. That's the third element. So because of a potential threat, and that's what the baby crying implies, she's up like that. But the jackhammer didn't wake her. Thank God for the reticular activating system. Cognitive psychologists will say over and over again, those who don't have it wind up autistic or schizophrenic or insane. We are able to screen out the things that are unnecessary. Today, I want to focus on one aspect of the cognitive brain function, and that's how the RAS filters out and builds scotomas to any information contrary to our paradigms. That's just one of the three things, but that's what I want to focus on. Forget threats, forget relevancy. Let's just talk about how the RAS screens out anything that is not relevant to our paradigms, our internal belief systems. Some of you know, and you need to hear this story 10 times, so I don't mind telling you again. Some of you know about the story that I like to refer to, about Houdini, because in his career, there was one time when he almost blew it, and he wrote about it in his memoirs, and here's what happened. Houdini would go anywhere to break out of any lock or any kind of, he would perform any kind of escape, as long as the media was there. He was at the height of his career when a new bank opened in London. And essentially, they said, this is a lock that can't be picked. There's nobody, including Houdini, that can break into or out of our vault. And they challenged Houdini, who at the time was in America, to come to London and break out of the vault. Now, those of you who don't know his secret, he had two. One was nobody ever saw what he was doing, and two, well, here's how it worked. He was allowed to kiss his wife, the two conditions. He was allowed to always kiss his wife, and then they always had to drop a curtain so nobody could see how he performed his escapes. Those were the only two criteria. Now, what happened was he had spent over 10 years developing a system of lock picking, and his wife had a wire in her mouth, and she'd pass it to his when they kissed, and then he'd go in, they'd pull the curtain, he'd pull the wire out and pick any lock. Whether it was on his wrist, whether it was a bank, he was a master lock picker with this wire, and it had two little tools, one on each end, and he was a master. And so he went to London at the height of his career, and he agreed to break out, and they gave him 3 minutes. He accepted that, but again, he got to kiss his wife, and they were going to drop the curtain so nobody could see what he was doing. And he had already picked this kind of lock. He knew the company, manufacturer. They put him in the vault. They shut the door, pulled down the curtains after he kissed his wife, and of course he had the wire. And immediately he wrote in his memoirs, I pulled the wire out and I started working on the lock that I knew how to pick. But he said a fascinating thing happened. Within the first minute, none of the familiar clicking sounds I had heard practicing on this kind of lock had occurred. And I began to think, my gosh, I'm not making any headway. He said after 2 minutes, with 1 minute left, I was getting real nervous. He said after 2 minutes and 30 seconds, with so much sweat on my hands and perspiration, I inadvertently leaned against the vault door and got a handkerchief out, and the door creaked open. The door had never been locked. True story. Except in Houdini's mind. That's called a paradigm. And he wrote later, I almost ruined my career. And he said, the stupid thing about it was I had been teased over and over by my friends and family about the fact that someday I was going to fail to get out of a predicament because they didn't actually perform what they said they did by locking it. And I'd heard that, but I never thought to check the vault door. The door was locked in Houdini's mind. He changed his paradigms to include this. I can escape from any set of circumstances, no matter how locked up I am in 5 minutes, and I can escape from any set of circumstances unlocked in 5 seconds. Let me never forget to check. And armed with that paradigm, Houdini was never, ever stumped in his entire career. The only locks that are blocking the 97%ers from joining the 3%ers in MLM, going from $100,000 a year to $100,000 a month, are simply paradigms. Because when the paradigms shift, any system will work. There are probably 30 different ways to do network marketing in every company in this room, because 30 experts have figured out the systems, and every one of them is probably equally good. But the reason 3% of the people are all that ever figure out how to do it using a multitude of different systems is because they either blunder into or never had the repetitive, negative, erroneous paradigms programmed into their brain at a young age. And it's a philosophical debate as to how a certain percentage were able, without this technology, to figure it out, and others weren't. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I don't want to waste your time on that. We have had repetitive statements since childhood build erroneous paradigms in our brains, and our RAS has built scotomas, which are blocks, mental blocks against any conflicting information. Once a repetitious thought is programmed into us in the form of a brain, mind, set, or paradigm, if you will, over repetition, over years and years and years, ladies and gentlemen, our reticular activating system simply builds scotomas, blocks against any conflicting information coming our way that might get us out of those belief systems. And so we have a built-in mechanism for calling out reality in the form of ideas that will help us rise to our full potential once the paradigm in place does not allow us to do so. I think Bandura and Sanford was really onto something here. Our paradigms have come from respected authorities. And let me just give you a few. And I'm going to tell you how big a paradigms these are in your brains. You're going to give me the last word of these paradigms. That's how big a part they are of your life and mine. And you've been hearing them since you were very, very small. Here's the first one. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into. It's lonely at the. Money is the root of all. Some people are just in the right place at the. Yeah, see, all of us know this. You've memorized it. All I've got to do is give you the opening lines, and you know money's evil, and you know I don't know about you, I want to go to heaven. Don't you? But we ain't getting there if we're rich. That's a paradigm. And anybody that comes along and says, wealth is a virtue, oh, my brain, my RAS, puts up a scotoma real quick. That guy's a heathen. Did you hear that, honey? He thinks money is a virtue. We know money is the root of all evil. Yeah, right. That's why Jesus had a treasure. And the others, there are others. And, I could go into a lot of them. Poverty is a virtue. How many of you have heard that? Poverty is a virtue. Do not store up treasures on earth. Paradigms change easily. And this is the good news. Paradigms change easily through repetitive self-talk. Once our brains are totally re-engineered with simple repetition, what occurs is our reticular activating system begins to build new scotomas to irrelevant data to that new paradigm, and then it lets in all pertinent information which supports our new paradigm. See, it's been blocking everything that was not in accordance with those very sentences you just finished. And over a period of years, through the process of repetition, we've created these paradigms that the reticular activating system is going to go out of its way to block any conflicting data as it appears to you or me, unless it's a threat or unless it's relevant. And we have told our brain unconsciously that anything is irrelevant to our paradigms. And if we haven't told it that, it happens anyway. And here's the good news. Once the new paradigms are in place, nothing is grandiose. Once the new paradigms are in place, there's no such thing as grandiosity because the sky becomes the limit. And that's why a man in Seattle earns $1 billion a year. There were no scotomas to that in his brain. You can leap into the 3% with any company, with any upline, with any system. Once you've got the right paradigm, now hear that. You can leap into the 3% who earn $100,000 a week or $1 million a month, whatever. Regardless of your company, don't change. Geographical cures don't work. Regardless of your upline, regardless of the system. Once you've got the right paradigm, because most of the systems out there work and our industry's unlimited, most of our companies are great, if you just do two things. Apply tenacity and perseverance. Isn't it funny when you hear people talk? I was listening to Eileen. When I first got in the business back in the early 80s, or Ken, when I got in the business back in 77, Robert, but it doesn't matter who you hear from. Typically, the people that are in that big number, the 3%, they've been with the same deal 10, 15, 20 years. They've had problems. They've had scumbags in the home office who didn't have the brains God gave a crowbar. They've had downlines stolen. They've been cheated and lied to by the presidents of their companies. They've had people stolen in foreign markets and people go in 6 months early and build illegitimate downlines. Everything that's happened to all of us has happened in every company. But some people just get beyond it and they stick with it, and through tenacity and perseverance, they make it to the pinnacle. And they do it because of the right paradigms. My personal examples I want to share with you because I think they're relevant. About a year ago, I decided I wanted to earn $1 million a week. And it was because I had some projects I was working on that were going to take a whole lot more than what I earned. Now, I believed, and it was probably the wrong paradigm, I believed it was going to be harder to earn $1 million a week in the field of network marketing than if I spread myself out and got into a lot of different things simultaneously. And so I created I re-engineered a new paradigm that simply said I'm open and receptive to any ideas which will help me to earn $1 million a week, whether they come inside or outside MLM. Now, I want to tell you what happened the first month. Nothing. I had been so convinced that MLM was the only vehicle for wealth that it took me a while to build in this new paradigm. That anything, especially money, could come from outside this field, especially somebody without a degree or any special skills. First month, absolutely nothing happened. I hadn't had time to replace the old paradigm. MLM's where you make all the money. The second month, I got a phone call from Richard and Ursula Tracy. Now, they're very close friends of Renee's and mine in Reno. Richard was the guy who designed the Learjet for Bill Lear. He was the chief engineer, and he's a consultant now to Boeing, Aerospace, a bunch of different companies. And they invited us to dinner, which is no big deal. We go out to dinner there probably once every month or two, and they're dear friends, good people. Richard told me the story of his 1.5 Mach 1.5 business jet and the laminar flow wing that had been his pet project all his life, and why he could build a jet that would outperform any of the Lear jets or anything made by Bombardier or Gulfstream or any of the other companies. And for the first time, I heard his story. He had told me about his invention probably 20 times, but my paradigm was just MLM, and it just didn't interest me. But now, all of a sudden, I was open and receptive, and I got to thinking, gosh, if Richard really has created the first supersonic business jet, what an invention. And I started thinking about it. The same month, I met the senior vice president of ethics for Boeing Airline by total coincidence. And I picked his brain a little, and he told me how he'd go about marketing it. The same month, I met the senior vice president of Raytheon, who introduced me to the chairman of the board of Raytheon Air in Wichita that just acquired Beechcraft. I would have never even paid attention to what this guy did, but I was open and receptive to outside ideas. I met the chief technology transfer expert from NASA, and among these 4 experts was able to put together a reasonably good idea about how to market this business jet, which, by the way, is a $100 million project, and I get 20% of it, because that's what Richard, my good friend, offered to give me. But there was one missing element. And for the last 2 or 3 months, it's been bothering me before I wanted to approach one of these companies. And then last night on the way here, I sat down next to Howard Putman. He sat next to me in the plane, former CEO of Southwest Airlines, whom I would have never talked aviation with, probably wouldn't even talked to. He was busy reading. But when I found out who he was, I told him about the one problem I couldn't quite figure out to market this laminar flow wing, and he solved it for me in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know if we'll market it. I hope we do for Richard's sake. He's worked his whole life making minimal income as a brilliant aviation expert, and for his sake, I'd love to do it. And for the sake of the projects we're working on, I could use the money. But let me tell you something. I would have never met these other people, and I would have never been in a position to even do this had I not changed my paradigm. You see what I'm talking about? And that's just one example. The third month, Prima Publishing called. I didn't know anything about Prima Publishing. The third month after I was open to all this. And they said, we really liked what was written about you in Wave 3, and Wave 3 sold well. Would you write a book for us your first year in networking? And we really didn't have time, didn't really want to. But they drove to Reno from California, and we went out to dinner, and they made us a really remarkable offer to write a book that we had never even planned on. The fourth month, I heard about a guy in Arkansas who has developed an electric car and a helicopter that runs on hydrogen peroxide with zero ecological problems, because when you split, hydrogen peroxide just turns into water, and the helicopter doesn't even have a motor. The problem he's had is he hadn't been able to figure out how to market it. Now, here's the point. We all miss hundreds of ideas a day that are right there, are bombarding us, because our reticular activating system says, that's not relevant to what you think is right. This isn't relevant. That's not a threat. This won't work. Until we change paradigms. And then that executive secretary at the back of our brain becomes our greatest ally toward fulfilling our dreams and goals, because it builds blocks against those things that will not assist us in our forward progress. And it lets in, through the filtering process, anything relevant to achieving that objective.
Wow, I hope you are getting all this good stuff that Mark is talking about. Why don't we take another mental break, give it a chance to kind of digest in your mind a little bit, and then we will return to the seminar to wrap everything up.
Here's the most exciting fact of all, according to these cognitive psychotherapists. It's easy to change a paradigm, no matter how deep-rooted, because a new mind thought, a new brain concept will supplant it relatively fast through saturation. PR people have known this for years. If you really want to get people to act, show them something 17 times and they'll take action. It's called saturation advertising. Well, I got news for you. I'm going to give you a simple set of new paradigm mind twisters that if you'll repeat them 10 times a day, especially before bed at night, will replace the old worn-out tapes that have kept us in the 97th percentile of low achievers in an unlimited achievement business. First, dramatic wealth is a virtue. Dramatic wealth is a virtue. Second, I am open and receptive to any ideas and people who will help me achieve my goal of dramatic wealth. I'll repeat that. I am open and receptive to any ideas and people who will help me achieve my goal of dramatic wealth. Number 3, I am worth, and I'm going to leave this blank for you. I think you should plug in 100,000. I am worth blank a month, and I love sharing it with those in need. I am worth blank a month, and I love sharing it with those in need. And finally, through perseverance, I am creating the financial dynasty I so richly deserve. Through perseverance, I am creating the financial dynasty that I so richly deserve. Through perseverance, I am creating the financial dynasty I so richly deserve. That's it. Now, I know that for many of you, because I was in the same boat, your reticular activating system is going to just do flip-flops at this new information, and you're going to think, that's peripheral metaphysics. I heard that hogwash. That's New Age. Them are affirmations. Honey, we ain't doing them affirmations. That's like that silly guy over in the Greek islands, Yanni. He's sending us to hell. I'm not doing affirmations. I understand how the reticular activating system works. Listen to me. You don't even have to believe these new paradigms. That's what is so beautiful. That's what Steven Pinker points out in his book, How the Mind Works. You don't have to even buy into them. All you got to do is repeat them. Because your reticular activating system can't take a joke. It's just an executive secretary that says, yes, boss, whatever you say. I think the height of selfishness in our industry comes from people who aren't making it, who say, that money is not right. I have ministers call me from all over the country who say, Yarnell, you're a phony. How can you reconcile your theology as a former Christian minister with all the money that you make? And I say it's real simple. If you think it's sinful, don't not make it. Just give it away. See? When you, ladies and gentlemen, and I are confronted with an opportunity to rise to levels we never dreamed possible in terms of income, if you can't figure out how to spend it on yourself and your loved ones, and you really can't when you get to the big money, create a goal bigger than yourself. The height of pompous idiocy and selfishness is to say, that isn't religious. I can't make all that money. That's wrong. Make it and give it away. For crying out loud, that doesn't take a real smart person to figure that one out. Just don't spend it on yourself, but don't not make it. There are other people who need it. And if you can't find people in your community, call me. We got all kinds of problems in Reno and in Northern California. I'll put your money to good use. The final element is this. Everyone is a creative genius, but generally it is those that focus on one system in one field who are recognized as those creative geniuses. Once you've learned the paradigms and you've supplanted the old ones that are not going to work for you, and once your reticular activating system is working, realize this. Stay where you are, follow one system, and persevere. Geographical cures don't work. You are a creative genius. You just don't know it. I want to read in closing from one chapter in this book about creative genius by Steven Pinker. I mean, he's head of the MIT, the neurological department at MIT. He's a pretty smart guy. Here's what he says. I love this. I love this. And what about those creative geniuses? How can natural selection explain a Shakespeare, a Mozart, an Einstein, an Abdul-Jabbar? All of us are creative. All of us are creative geniuses. Every time we stick a handy object under the leg of a wobbly table or think up a new way to bribe a child into his pajamas, we've used our faculties to create a novel outcome. But creative geniuses are distinguished not by their extraordinary works, but by their extraordinary way of working. They're not supposed to think like you and me. Notice the stereotype. They burst on the scene as prodigies. They listen to their muse and defy conventional wisdom. Creative geniuses work when the inspiration hits and leap with insight while the rest of us plod in baby steps along well-worn paths. They put a problem aside and let it incubate in the unconscious. Then without warning, a bulb lights up and fully formed solution presents itself. Aha! The genius leaves us with masterpieces, a legacy of the unrepressed creativity of the unconscious. Geniuses, truthfully, are wonks. This is Stephen Barry. You know what a wonk is? That's a student of something who just works and grinds away until he succeeds. Geniuses are wonks. The typical genius pays dues for at least 10 years before contributing anything of lasting value. Mozart composed symphonies at 8, but they stunk. His first masterwork came in his 12th year of his career. During the apprenticeship, geniuses immerse themselves in their work. They absorb tens of thousands of problems and solutions, so no challenge is completely new, and they can draw on a vast repertoire of motifs and strategies. They keep an eye on the competition, a finger to the wind, and are either discriminating or lucky in their choice of problems. But they are not freaks, with minds utterly unlike ours or unlike anything we can imagine evolving in a species that has always lived by its wits. The creative genius creates good ideas because we all do. Prodigies are often born in a certain era. Now listen to this. Prodigies are often born in a certain era, blunder into the right profession because they happen to be passionate about it, often die unappreciated, and then 200 years later, they're heralded as a creative genius. Woody Allen points this out in his fictitious letter from a depressed Vincent van Gogh to his brother by simply putting him in a different era and a different profession. In Allen's letter, Vincent van Gogh is a dentist living today instead of a romantic impressionist living 200 years ago. He writes to his brother, "Dear Phil, Mrs. Saul Schwimmer is suing me because I made a bridge as I felt and not to fit her ridiculous mouth. That's right. I can't work to order like some common tradesman. I decided her bridge should be enormous and billowing with wild, explosive teeth flaring up in every direction like fire. Now she's upset because it won't fit in her mouth. I tried forcing the false plate in, but it sticks out like a starburst chandelier. Still, I find it beautiful." So much for the creative genius. Ladies and gentlemen, remember Houdini, remember Cliff Young. There are only two kinds of people in our industry, people who think they can and people who think they can't, and they're both right. Change your paradigms, and you'll discover that the mental door to creative genius was never even locked in the first place. God bless you.
Wow. This is one of those tapes you should definitely listen to over and over again for at least the next 21 days straight. Why? Because Mark has just laid out what I would say are some of the most critical factors to you developing a multi-million-dollar organization. You see, when most people get started in network marketing, they immediately think that the secret to their long-lasting success is to quickly get efficient in all the technical know-hows. Now, don't feel bad if this is you, because most of us think this way early on in our careers, and some continue to think this way even after they've had some success. After all, Mark was earning over $15,000 per month, and he continued to think it was because of the technical know-how. Do you remember when he said,
"It was my technique, I thought. You know what I didn't know? I was an unconscious competent. I had the competency skills to build a huge network, but I didn't know how I did it. So I pretended that the key was systems."
So what is the difference between the 97%ers who are barely getting by and the top 3%ers who are living a life of adventure, excitement, and magic?
The only locks that are blocking the 97 percenters from joining the 3 percenters in MLM, going from $100,000 a year to $100,000 a month, are simply paradigms. Because when the paradigms shift, any system will work.
So make a decision to use some of the strategies that Mark has given you and start removing some of the disempowering paradigms and start implanting empowering paradigms. By the way, a paradigm is simply a belief that's commonly held. And what you want to do is you want to create some paradigms that can help move you towards the future you desire. Get familiar with the material that Mark has shared with you by buying and reading the 3 books he suggested. Number 1 was Thought Contagion by Aaron Lynch. Number 2 was Self-Efficacy by Dr. Bandera of Stanford University. And number 3 was How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker of MIT. Get rid of the blind spots that may be limiting your success. Program your reticular activating system so that it will bring to you the people, places, and things that will be supportive of your dreams. And as Mark says,
create a goal bigger than yourself. The height of pompous idiocy and selfishness is to say, that isn't religious. I can't make all that money. That's wrong. Make it and give it away. For crying out loud, that doesn't take a real smart person to figure that one out. Just don't spend it on yourself, but don't not make it. There are other people who need it.
This is Jerry Clark saying, if you believe it, you can achieve it. But if you doubt it, you will live without it. Go, go, go.